This weekend, Vivek Ramaswamy, the announced co-head of DOGE, the newly proposed Department of Governmental Efficiency, said that DOGE will simply delete government agencies outright. He, with Elon Musk, the other co-head of this venture, are not politicians. They are determined to bring a chainsaw, not a scalpel, to years of government fat and bloat. But this department needs to be first formally created by Congress, and only Congress can create and close down departments. So how will DOGE be able to take flight? And will the swamp actually allow itself to be drained by essentially a startup venture in this administration? Joining us to break all this down, we have best-selling author, investigative journalist, and president of the Government Accountability Institute, Peter Schweizer. Peter, welcome back.
Great to be with you, Chanel, as always. Thanks for having me.
You know, Peter, as I know you probably are, as someone who loves freedom in more ways and more categories than one, the idea that we would trim down this bloated government, trim down an institution, sets of institutions that have been going after so many freedom aspects of life is very exciting. That said, I also have this trepidation that somehow Washington is going to find a way to prevent it from actually taking off. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, yeah, I understand your skepticism, and I would share some of it. But look, there are a couple of very encouraging signs. Number one, this seems to be a high priority item for the president-elect, which is important. You want to have somebody who's not just talking it, but actually wants to do it. That's the first thing. The second thing is you've got two very high energy entrepreneurs who are very aggressive, work long hours, know how to be very creative. And so those are two great starting points. The third thing I would add is that you have, now the majorities aren't large, but you have majorities in the House and the Senate. So that means if you can hold the Republicans together, which is of course not to be assumed, but if you can hold them together, you can actually get rid of some government agencies, because as you correctly pointed out, and this is something that a lot of people out there have to keep in mind, it's not just that Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy can decide we're going to get rid of a government agency. The president can't do that. You actually have to have Congress pass it. So that, I think, is the key component. Time here is of the essence. I think you've got to be serious about it. You've got to be committed and detailed. But the longer that this drags on, I think the more you give time for the swamp to kind of reinforce, to go out and make promises and to make deals in a way that makes it hard to carry this out. So time is of the essence. I would say go quickly rather than take your time and be systematic.
What areas are you looking forward most to getting trimmed down, cleaned up, purged?
Good words. I think there are lots of places. I think if you're talking about sheer money, of course, there's the whole question of how the Department of Justice has been weaponized, and there's a separate issue there. But if you're talking about raw numbers, I think you're talking about the Department of Education, for example. The Department of Education is a notorious dumping ground. I remember when they had a severe snowstorm in Washington, D.C., and only essential workers were supposed to show up. The Washington Post reported that 92% of Department of Education employees were non-essential and didn't have to show up. That tells you everything you need to know. So I would start with the Department of Education. I think there's a lot of stuff that can be done at the Pentagon. Look, I'm a big believer in a strong national defense, peace through strength, but it's not being spent efficiently, and there's a lot of fat and there's a lot of waste. So the Pentagon is another area. Again, you got to apply it in the right places where you can do a lot of cutting. I would begin with those two government agencies, and then you can start looking at health and human services and, of course, housing and urban development as well. Those are all areas where you can get rid of a lot of the grants, a lot of the contractors, and a lot of the personnel and programs as well.
Well, what they will be doing, no doubt, is something you're very familiar with, which is following the money. When you follow the money, you find the corruption. And that's what really DOGE ultimately should and could and will be about if they carry this out swiftly. As you say, I think that's a key point. But, you know, following the money, I agree with you. I think the DOJ is going to be a really interesting place, but as far as sheer numbers, it'll be Department of Ed and the Pentagon. Now look at the Pentagon, never successfully going through a single audit, not one.
Yeah, yeah. And here's something I would add, by the way, Chanel. This is something that a lot of people might overlook because a lot of the attention right now, rightfully so, is being focused on the people that are going to be in Trump's cabinet, the people that are going to be the secretaries of these various government agencies. But there's a very important appointment that makes a huge difference in being able to downsize and tackle these problems. And those are the inspector generals of these various departments. Health and Human Services, all these government agencies have an inspector general. And the job of the inspector general is not just to audit in terms of money, to see where's the money going, is it being misspent. They are also looking at fundamental questions. Is this government program actually doing what it was chartered to do? And if not, why not? That is the sort of thing that creates opportunities to go in and say this government agency is not doing what it's supposed to do. It should be shut down and it should be reformed. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done within the bowels of the bureaucracy itself. And the analogy I would use is this. When you bring in somebody to head up a government agency like Health and Human Services or the Department of Homeland Security or even DOJ, you want somebody who, of course, is carrying out the wishes of the president and his mission, but you don't want just people that sort of fly over and drop bombs, okay? That's important and that's helpful.
Yeah.
What you need are people that know how to fight in the trenches, because it's trench warfare ultimately that needs to be done here. So you need people who have some experience in these government agencies, who've not been captured by the swamp, but understand how the system works, because it's going to be that trench warfare that's going to be key. My friend Jason Chaffetz told me once that as a member of Congress, he went into the Treasury Department and met with Treasury employees, and he said, where's the Secretary of Treasury? Why is he not here? And they said, well, we're the B team, as in we're going to be here when the Treasury Secretary is out of office. It's the B team that runs these government agencies, and those are the people you have to root out. Wow. It's not just making a speech, making declarations. You actually have to go in the trenches and root these people out.
No, that's such a great vignette to illustrate that point. You know, on the other side, as DOGE is going to be this organization with all of the flashy, fun headlines, and they have a fun job, I believe. On the other hand, you've got a little more. A little quieter player, but so important, especially considering the last 8 years, I'd say, of censorship that we have gone through as a nation. So FCC commissioner has been selected, Brendan Carr. He's an absolute First Amendment free speech rock star. Very excited as far as like media goes that he is going to be in there. He's already announced that he's going to go after big tech and tell them that they need to stop cooperating with organizations that are censoring conservative media. What is it that you look most forward to in Brendan Carr's FCC?
This is a great appointment, and here's why. A lot of people look at the Federal Communication Commission in Washington, D.C., and they basically see it as an industry-controlled entity. Usually the people that head up the FCC, this goes for Republicans and Democrats, are often people that are sort of immersed in the world of business and communications. And so it's about issues about monopolies in the media. Can this company take over that media company, et cetera, et cetera? And that's all important. What you have with Brendan Carr is actually a First Amendment advocate who's the head of the Federal Communications Commission. This is going to be terrific, and this is a guy who doesn't believe in government hand being too strong, but on the other hand recognizes the problems of government monopoly. And what we always, I think, need to be mindful of is not to be pro-business, but to be pro-market. And those are two separate things. And what Brandon Carr recognizes is if you have 2 or 3 media companies that are dominating things in the social media space, and by the way, that's where the vast majority of people now get their information and get their news. It's not by picking up the newspaper. It's not by going to websites. It's by going to their social media stream. So if you have 2 or 3 players that have monopoly, essentially, like you could argue Google has in search, they have enormous power and influence, and you need to make sure that you are dealing with those companies in a manner that is ensuring that freedom of speech reigns. So I think this Brendan Carr is a great appointment. I look for him to get pushback from the industry. I'm sure there's going to be pushback in the Senate as far as his appointment is ensured. But I think he is going to do a fantastic job. And the other great news is this is not a guy who's looking to go work for Google when he leaves. So many of these appointments are looking for their next gig after they're done with government service. That's not Brendan Carr. So I love this appointment.
I perfectly said. And again, it's such a unicorn, especially in D.C., to find someone who can toe that line and is not trying to build their career in the next big company after they leave. Because as you know, taking a government job is usually a pay cut for most of these guys. And so they justify it often by saying, well, I'll get paid on the back end. He doesn't strike us as one of those guys. So very, very good news for America. On another front, it's not just the government and these deep state figures who are worried about the shakeup from the Trump administration. The media also appears to be fairly desperate to kiss and make up. Here's Joe Scarborough and Mika trying to make up with Trump this morning after they made apparently the secret pilgrimage to Mar-a-Lago. Listen to this.
Joe and I went to Mar-a-Lago to meet personally with President-elect Trump. It was the first time we have seen him in 7 years.
Now, we talked about a lot of issues, including abortion, mass deportation, threats of political retribution against political opponents, and media outlets. We talked about that a good bit. And it's going to come as no surprise to anybody who watches this show, has watched it over the past year or over the past decade, that we didn't see eye to eye on a lot of issues, and we told him so.
What we did agree on was to restart communications.
Peter, I can't tell if they have a gun to their backs or if they really were uncomfortable admitting that this was something that they had to do, that they knew they had to do, or what. But what did you think about the way they laid that out?
Yeah, I mean, the way they laid it out, obviously, is very self-serving. And look, here's what I would say. If I were advising President-elect Trump, and I'm certainly not, I would have advised him not to take this meeting. But I think, look, he's demonstrated, like the meeting he had with Joe Biden in the White House, he's kind of a forgive and a forget guy. And that's saying something to the fact that these two MSNBC hosts called him Hitler. And he's willing to set that aside. I personally don't really see any political advantage to Trump communicating with them. He obviously decided to do so. It's to a huge upside to MSNBC because they want to be relevant again. The ratings at MSNBC have crashed through the floor. They've got to figure out a way to reconstitute themselves as a news show rather than kind of this shrill denouncement of Trump, which is what it had been for so long. So I certainly see their motivation in it. And Trump has sent them a lifeline, which I think is going to help them. So it's going to be interesting to see how these dynamics play out. I think we're going to see others of them. But I think at the end of the day, we have to recognize that once you call somebody Hitler, unless you are prepared to be a complete laughingstock, you have to maintain in your mind that, well, he still has Hitler-like qualities, because otherwise you have no credibility. And so for that reason, I don't think it's going to change a whole lot at MSNBC. And again, I would have advised him not to take this meeting because I don't see the personal upside for him doing so.
I think they're honestly afraid of what's going to happen to new media and new media's new foothold in the media landscape. They know that they're going to be irrelevant if they continue to dismiss Trump the way they have dismissed him. Now, that's not to say that you can't be the media. You know this, not to be the media and speak truth to power. That is the media's job. But the way they've been doing it for the past 10 years, Peter, I mean, you've tracked all this. It's fairly disgusting. And the people have recognized that this is not journalism. This is just their obsessions playing out on live TV.
Yeah, look, Chanel, we've talked about this before. My view has always been whoever's the president, you like them, you dislike them, you should report things, right? If there's actually news to report. The problem is that's not what MSNBC has done. That's not what Joe and Mika have done. It has been sort of innuendo. It has been personal attacks. It has been, quote unquote, anonymous sources. Anonymous sources.
They don't have sources.
Exactly right. That's what I'm saying. I mean, toss them by the wayside. If you're making a claim about somebody that is so, this person is an existential threat to democracy, I mean, come on, go out on the public record and do so. They don't do that. So it's not journalism. And I think they're going to have a very hard time, putting the toothpaste back in the tube and going back to the days of where they were before. But you are exactly right. They have to do it. Some of the ratings numbers post-election have been absolutely down at the floor level. They have no choice, no option. They have to figure out something new to do, or they're going to get sold and go out of business. And I think this is their attempt to do so.
I think they have a lot to worry about, but we'll let the public tell them that themselves. Peter, always great to visit with you. Thank you.